Every day, a cat left home and rode a school bus to a place no one understood. For 4 months, nobody questioned it. Not really, until the truth about his destination came out, and it shattered his owner's heart before it healed it completely. This is the story of an orange tabby named Scout, except that wasn't really his name, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why a cat would choose every single morning to leave a warm home and a woman who loved him just to ride a bus across town to somewhere he wasn't supposed to remember. Let's start at the beginning, with a bus driver who thought he'd seen everything. Mr. Halverson had driven school buses for 19 years. 19 years of squeaky brakes, spilled juice boxes, and kids arguing over window seats. He thought there wasn't a single thing left on his route that could surprise him. Then, one gray October morning, an orange tabby walked up to his bus stop like he owned the sidewalk. It was 7:15 a.m. The corner of 5th and Maple was quiet, except for the hiss of the bus doors opening. Mr. Halverson watched, half amused, as the cat sat down calmly at the edge of the curb, right where the kids usually lined up, and waited. He assumed it was a stray, curious about the noise. He pulled the lever, the doors folded open. The cat walked straight up the steps, not hesitant, not sniffing around like most strays would. He climbed the steps with the calm confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times, padded down the aisle, and settled himself onto the front seat, tail curled neatly around his paws, like he was simply waiting for the bus to get moving. Mr. Halverson stared into the rearview mirror for a long moment. "Well," he said finally to no one in particular, "guess you're riding today." The cat didn't so much as blink. He rode for exactly 5 minutes. Then, as the bus slowed at the stop sign on Oak Avenue, he stood, stretched, and made his way calmly to the doors, waiting for them to open like any other passenger who knew exactly where they needed to be. That was the first day. It was not the last. By the second week, the kids had named him Scout. By the first month, they'd started saving him bits of breakfast, a strip of bacon here, a corner of a granola bar there. Scout accepted every offering with the graceful indifference of a small orange king, purring just enough to be polite, then returning to his spot by the window. Rain or shine, snow or blistering heat, Scout never missed his ride, 4 months straight, every single school day. Mr. Halverson had long since questioned it. In a job full of long, repetitive routes and tired mornings, Scout had become something rare, a good mystery, a harmless one, he told himself. He had no idea how wrong he was about that word, harmless. 2 miles away, in a small house with a garden gone slightly wild since autumn began, a woman named Mara Cooper woke up to the unmistakable, miserable weight of the flu. She hadn't called in sick in over a year. It felt strange even dialing the number, croaking out an apology to her supervisor before hanging up and shuffling to the kitchen for tea. The house was too quiet in the mornings now. It had been too quiet for over a year, ever since her husband, Daniel, had passed. Grief had a way of settling into empty rooms and staying there, patient, waiting for her to notice it again every time she walked past his reading chair. Her son, Theodore, had noticed the quiet too. 4 months ago, worried about his mother rattling around an empty house, he'd driven to a local shelter on his lunch break and come home with a small, subdued orange cat. "He's a little sad," he had warned her, setting the carrier down gently on her kitchen table. "The shelter said he needed a patient owner. I thought maybe you two could be patient with each other." She named him Winnie. He'd taken weeks to warm up to her, sleeping in corners, avoiding her lap, watching her from a careful distance with wide green eyes. But slowly he had softened. He curled against her while she watched TV. He waited by the door when she came home from work. In quiet, unremarkable ways, Winnie had become the reason she got out of bed some mornings. That morning, mug of tea warming her hands, Mara stood at the kitchen window and watched the neighborhood stir to life. A jogger, a mail truck, the familiar yellow shape of the school bus rumbling down the street. She barely registered any of it. Her mind was elsewhere, lost in fever and fog. Then something at the edge of her vision made her go completely still. A small orange shape was trotting down the sidewalk, purposeful, unhurried, heading directly towards the bus stop. "Winnie?"
she whispered, setting her mug down so hard tea sloshed over the rim. He never left the yard. He was strictly an indoor cat, one who preferred sunbeams and soft blankets to the cold outdoors. There was a small pet door installed for emergencies, but Winnie had shown zero interest in it since the day he arrived. And yet, there he was, walking with total confidence toward a bright yellow school bus, tail held high. She pressed her hand to the cold glass as he reached the stop. The doors opened. He climbed the steps without a moment's hesitation, disappearing inside. The doors folded shut behind him. The bus pulled away. Mara stood frozen at the window for a long time after it disappeared around the corner, tea growing cold and forgotten in her shaken hand. "I must be hallucinating," she said out loud to the empty kitchen. "It's the fever, that's all this is." But at evening, at his usual time, Winnie returned home through the pet door, calm and unbothered, as if nothing at all had happened. He ate his dinner, he groomed himself by the fireplace, he curled up in her lap while she sat, stunned into silence, staring at him like she'd never really seen him before. She called in sick again the next day, and the day after that. Each morning at 7:15 a.m., like clockwork, Winnie slid through the pet door, walked to the corner, and boarded the bus. By Wednesday, Mara understood something with absolute certainty. This wasn't a fever dream. This was a routine her cat had been hiding from her every single day for 4 months, right under her nose.
By Thursday, her fever had broken enough that she could think clearly, and clear thinking, in this case, meant one thing. She needed answers. She threw on her coat over pajamas she hadn't bothered to change, grabbed her keys out of habit even though she didn't plan to drive anywhere, and hurried out the front door just as Winnie reached the corner. She caught up just as the bus doors were sliding open. Before we continue with what Mara discovered on that bus, if this story has you hooked, hit like and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling stories like this one. Breathing hard, cheeks flushed from the cold and the run, Mara stepped onto the bus right behind her cat. Mr. Halverson turned. His eyes went wide with confusion at the sight of a disheveled woman standing in his aisle at 7:15 in the morning. "Ma'am," he said carefully, one hand still on the door lever, "this is a school bus. I'm going to need you to step off." "That cat is mine," Mara said, pointing at Winnie, who had already claimed his usual seat with total indifference to the commotion around him. Her voice cracked slightly. "His name is Winnie." Mr. Halverson's confusion only deepened. "Scout? His name is Winnie? I adopted him 4 months ago." 4 months? He let out a short, disbelieving laugh, shaking his head slowly. "He's been riding my bus for 4 months, ma'am. Everyone on this route knows him. The kids call him Scout. He's practically part of the route at this point." He paused, studying her face, the exhaustion and fear plainly written there. "He always goes home in the evening, though, right? He comes back to you?" "Yes," Mara said quietly. "Every evening, like clockwork." She swallowed hard. "I need to see where he goes. Please." Mr. Halverson considered the unusual request for a long moment, glancing between the cat, the woman, and the small group of kids beginning to board at the next stop. "All right," he said, finally, with a small sigh. "Sit down, and let's not make this a regular thing." The bus rolled forward. Mara sat 3 rows back, watching Winnie the whole way, half expecting him to acknowledge her, to glance back and explain himself somehow. He never did. He sat by the window with total composure, utterly unbothered by her presence. At each stop, children climbed aboard and greeted him like an old friend. "Hi, Scout. Morning, buddy. I brought you bacon today." Winnie accepted every greeting with the same graceful, regal patience, tail curling contentedly, purring just loud enough to be heard over the engine's rumble. Mara watched, something twisting uncomfortably in her chest. He had an entire life on this bus that she'd known nothing about. 7 minutes later, the bus reached Oak Avenue. Winnie stood immediately, stretched once, and made his way to the doors, waiting with the calm patience of someone who had done this every single day for 4 months. Mara followed him off the bus, her heart hammering with anticipation. He didn't look back at her once.
He seemed entirely focused on the destination ahead, walking 3 blocks down the street without a shred of hesitation, past mailboxes and parked cars, until he stopped in front of a modest 2-story house with fresh, pale blue paint. He scratched at the front door once, twice, a careful 3rd time. The door opened. A man in his early 40s stood there, kind-eyed, wearing a soft gray cardigan against the morning chill. His whole face lit up the instant he spotted the cat waiting on his doorstep. "There you are, buddy," he said warmly, crouching down immediately to scratch behind Winnie's ears with the easy familiarity of routine. "I was starting to worry. You're later than usual today." He disappeared inside for a moment, then returned quickly with a small ceramic bowl of cat food. Winnie ate eagerly, while the man watched with a small, fond smile, the kind reserved for something you've grown to care about without quite meaning to. Mara approached slowly, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice unsteady. The man looked up, startled to find a stranger standing at the edge of his walkway. "Oh, sorry, can I help you?" "I'm sorry to bother you like this," Mara said carefully, forcing her voice to stay level. "But that cat is actually mine. His name is Winnie." The man stood slowly, genuine confusion spreading across his face. "Your cat? I had no idea he belonged to anyone. He just started showing up." He shook his head. "Does he come here every single day?" "Every morning, without fail," Mara said. "I only just found out myself." "I'm Lucas," he extended a hand, still visibly processing the situation. "I'm renting this place with my wife. We moved in a few months back. One morning, this little guy just showed up on our doorstep. He seemed hungry, so we fed him. He kept coming back every day after that. We honestly assumed he was a stray." Mara shook his hand, feeling like she'd stepped sideways into someone else's life. "I'm Mara. I live about 2 miles from here." She hesitated, then added almost involuntarily, "My son adopted him from a shelter about 4 months ago, gave him to me as a gift so I wouldn't feel so alone after my husband passed away last year." Lucas's expression shifted instantly into something softer, more sympathetic. "I'm so sorry for your loss. That's really hard." They stood together in awkward silence for a moment, neither quite sure what to say next, while Winnie continued eating peacefully at their feet, utterly unaware of the emotional current running between the 2 strangers standing over him. "This doesn't make any sense," Mara said, mostly to herself. "Why would he come all the way here every single day, taking a school bus across town, when I feed him well, when he has a warm home, when I love him?" Lucas shrugged helplessly, clearly just as baffled as she was. "I honestly have no idea why he does it." Mara felt tears sliding down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. "I need to take him home now." Of course. I'm so sorry. We really had no idea." She picked Winnie up. He didn't resist, didn't struggle, but as she turned to leave, he looked back at the house, back at Lucas, and something in his eyes broke her heart all over again. "Come on, Winnie," she whispered, voice barely holding together. "Time to go home." The walk back to the bus stop felt endless. Winnie sat quietly in her arms the entire way, not fighting her, not resisting, but craning his neck to keep looking back over her shoulder until the house disappeared from view. The ride home was silent. Winnie curled into her lap but didn't purr. He simply stared out the window, quiet and unmistakably sad. Back home, Mara set him down gently. He walked straight to the front window and sat there, staring out at nothing, at everything, at a house 2 miles away that clearly still meant something to him. Mara sank on the couch, her mind spinning. None of it added up. Why would Winnie cross town every single day to visit total strangers? What was pulling him there so consistently, so urgently? There had to be something she was missing, something important. She pulled out her phone. "Mom, everything okay?" Theodore's voice was immediately concerned. "Theodore, I need you to tell me exactly where you got Winnie. Which shelter?" "Blue Water Tails Rescue. Why? What's going on?" "What made you choose that particular shelter?" "It was close to where I was working at the time. I stopped in on my lunch break."
A pause. Mom, you're scaring me a little. What's happening? Did they tell you anything about his history, where he came from, who owned him before? Theodore hesitated. Not really. They said he'd been surrendered by someone, that he seemed a bit depressed, that he needed a patient owner. That's actually why I picked him for you. I thought you both needed each other. Did they say who surrendered him? No, they don't usually share surrender information. Please, Mara cracked completely now. Something is happening with him. He's been traveling cross town every single day to a specific house. I need to understand why. I think it has something to do with his past. A long pause. Let me talk to my supervisor. Can you hold? Mara waited. Each second stretched painfully long. Her hands trembled around the phone. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Finally, Jenny returned. My supervisor said we can share some basic information. The cat's original name was Winston. He was surrendered on May 2nd of this year. The person who surrendered him was David Brooks. Why was he surrendered? Let me read the notes. It says here that Winston's owner had passed away. David Brooks was handling the estate. He wasn't able to keep the cat himself, so he brought it to us. Mara's breath caught in her throat. The owner died? Yes, that's what the notes say. Do you want the previous address on file? We have one. Please. More typing. Yes, here it is, 847 Oak Street. The room seemed to spin, actually spin. Mara gripped the arm of the couch to steady herself. What was the owner's name, the person who died? Let me check the intake form. Here it is, Michael Brooks, age 73. The notes say Winston had lived with him for 6 years. Mara hung up the phone without another word. She sat in stunned silence, the pieces finally, devastatingly clicking into place. Winnie hadn't been visiting strangers. He'd been going home, to his real home, to the place where he'd lived for 6 years with a man named Michael, a man who had died, a man Winnie had never stopped looking for.
Mara walked slowly to the window, where Winnie still sat, still staring out at the empty street. She stared out beside him for a long moment, tears streaming freely down her face now. "You were trying to go home," she whispered. "This whole time, you were just trying to go home." She knelt down and pulled him gently into her arms, holding him tight against the sob building in her chest. "I'm not going to stop you," she said, voice shaking. "I'm not going to lock you inside. I'm not going to take away the one thing that brings you comfort, not after everything you've already lost." She set him down gently on the windowsill. "You can keep going," she told him, "as long as you need to. I understand now." Monday morning, 7:13 a.m. The pet door flapped open. Winnie slipped through it, out into the cool morning air. Mara watched from the window, but this time she knew exactly where he was going. There was no fear in her chest this time, only a strange, tender ache. "Come home safe," she whispered. And every school day after that, the pattern continued. Winnie left, Winnie returned. Mara kept the pet door unlocked, always unlocked, and she never once mentioned the journeys out loud. She simply welcomed him home every evening with soft pets, small treats, and gentle words, letting him carry his grief in silence, the same way she carried her own. Spring arrived. The anniversary of Michael's death passed quietly, unmarked by anyone but a small orange cat who made his usual trip to Oak Street that day. But when he returned home that evening, Mara noticed something different in his eyes, a softness, an acceptance that hadn't been there before. The school year ended. Summer arrived, and with it, the school bus stopped running its route. Mara wondered, quietly, what Winnie would do without it. But he seemed content simply to stay. He slept in warm patches of sunlight in the garden. He chased butterflies across the yard with a lightness she hadn't seen in him before. When September came and the school bus began its route again, Winnie boarded it exactly once. He made the familiar journey to Oak Street, sat with Lucas for a few quiet minutes, and then came home. He never went back again. 18 months after that first impossible discovery, Mara retired from her job. She was home now, every day, all day, and Winnie never left her side. He followed her from room to room. He sat curled beside her while she read. He slept in her lap while she watched television in the evenings, purring softly, contentedly, the way he never had in those first difficult months. The pet door remained unlocked. It always would. But Winnie never used it anymore. He had found his peace, his new home, his new person. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone, or something, is the freedom to leave. And because Mara gave Winnie that freedom, without conditions, without resentment, he chose, in the end, to stay. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he wanted to. He found new love without ever quite forgetting the old. And maybe that's the part of this story that stays with you longest. Not the mystery of the school bus or the strange coincidence of a cat who wouldn't let go of a memory. It's the quiet, patient love of a woman who let her cat grieve in his own way, on his own time, until one day he simply chose to come home for good. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you even a little, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling stories like this one.